Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, have you ever wondered how IoT is transforming the technology that makes it all happen? Or how smart networks enable other applications in everything from smart traffic lights, public transit signs, parking spaces, electric vehicle charging stations, and wanted to take a sneak peek behind the curtain at the tech that makes all that possible? Or wondered why smart cities benefit businesses and residents? If you have, well, you're in for a treat today because Phil Beecher, President and CEO of the UK-based Wi-Sun Alliance, a non-profit member organisation devoted to seamless connectivity, is going to join me in conversation about all this and much more today. But I've probably revealed too many spoilers already, so before I reveal any more, buckle up and hold on tight because I'm going to beam your ears all the way to Brighton here in the UK, where you can join me and Phil Beecher in conversation about all this and much more. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thank you, Neil. My name is Phil Beecher. I'm the president of Wi-Sun Alliance. Wi-Sun is an industry alliance, a not-for-profit organisation promoting communications technology for large-scale outdoor networks. Myself, I'm an engineer by trade. I graduated way back in 1978 and have been working in communications engineering since then.
And although this is an audio podcast, I've got to say you don't sound old enough to have graduated in 1978.
Well, thank you very much. And if you look at my LinkedIn photo, that's 10 years old. So surprisingly, the more recent ones don't look as good. There you go.
But if I take you way back, so let's go back to the 70s or even earlier. I mean, can you share your origin story, where your passion for technology came from, and maybe a moment that put you on the path that you're on today?
I suppose so, yes. When I was back at school, my favourite subjects were maths and physics because there wasn't so much writing as you needed to do for English. And then I went to University of Sussex where I took an engineering degree. And having done that, I left university, managed to find a job and realised that I actually quite enjoyed this. So I had a couple of jobs in around Brighton area where I still live. And then I went to work for a company that was a consultancy in communications engineering and started working on some leading edge communications. And that's where the real passion came. So data communications I still find fascinating, actually.
What a great story. And of course, it was that path that led you to Wi-Sun Alliance. You gave us a very brief overview a few moments ago, but for people that are just hearing about you for the first time, can you just expand on that and maybe tell the listeners a little bit more about the kind of problems that you're solving for your customers?
So, as I said, my background was communications, and I've been doing this in sort of leading edge communication technology. So I started working on Bluetooth when nobody knew what it was. And then maybe 10, 15 years ago, there was a growing need for large-scale communication networks for smart metering. And I was working for a silicon vendor at the time, a company called Silicon Labs. And I started working in standardization of the communications technology. When I mentioned large scale, we're talking about smart meter networks for San Francisco Bay Area, which are around 4 million smart meters, and Miami, Florida, which is about the same. So large outdoor networks. And there are specific requirements for these. They need to be very reliable and resilient. They need to be tamper-proof, high degree of security, and being smart meters and connected to the grid, obviously they need to be pretty well unhackable as well.
And you're working in an incredibly exciting space right now. There's a lot of heat and buzz around IoT and the building of smart cities. So I'm curious, What type of IoT technologies are you seeing being deployed in smart cities at the moment? Because there's a lot of future visions that we're seeing, but I'm curious what you're seeing right now.
Well, from our point of view, I think there is a mix of technologies. Obviously, a lot of fiber, particularly in Europe, and there's also an incentive as part of the infrastructure bill in the US for large fiber deployments, and those add on to the cellular networks. But neither of those is really suitable for connecting low power devices. So things like environmental monitoring, whether it's pollution or noise control, things like smart parking, where you might want to power the meters with solar panels. So there's this mix of technology. So for sensors and actuators, you tend to want to use a lower power type communications technology. Also something that doesn't get saturated when, for example, with the cellular network, if there's 10,000 people live streaming a football match, then the IoT part of it tends to suffer. So it's useful to have a different technology running the IoT.
And of course, smart networks enable other applications in everything from smart traffic signals, public transit signs, parking spaces, electric vehicle charging stations, and so much more. I think we often forget just how we're surrounded by this technology without even realising it. But can you offer an overview of how you're seeing IoT transforming cities?
As I mentioned in the beginning, the particular driver for this kind of technology came from the utility industry. And there were early initiatives, particularly in the US, for smart meter deployments. This was about being able to manage power better. So it's not just about meter reading, it's about how to optimize power usage. And obviously, the increase in renewables has made that more important. So how do you optimize the energy usage and do load shifting as well? So that's one area. So for smart cities, the modernization and providing communications technology for a street lighting network becomes a very good business case. So certainly in terms of energy reduction, cities are deploying LED street lighting by including communications technology at the same time. Then that gives the city more control over the street lights. It also allows them to monitor. There are things called day burners, which you still see even with LED street lighting, where there's a light on in the middle of the day. If you provide electronic control and monitoring, then the city can turn those off remotely.
Well, before we started recording the podcast today, you were telling me how you attend meetings in Asia, Europe and US and having conversations with people all over the world. And we have people listening all over the world today. So do you have any examples of cities who have recently deployed smart city technology just to help people listening understand the difference it can make?
Oh, I think so. So I think close to home, City of London has deployed around 12,000 streetlights. They did some research onto an appropriate communications technology, but their street lighting network is already saving them money in terms of energy usage, but is providing connectivity for a number of other projects, such as traffic flow monitoring and pollution monitoring around the Barbican area. Then a little further away, Paris has deployed, I think, around 380,000 streetlights. So again, a street lighting network. Copenhagen started probably about 5-6 years ago with the street lighting network, and now has integrated smart signs and traffic signals. And then get a bit further away, and there are some very large smart meter networks. So I think the largest smart meter network in the world is Tokyo Electric Power Company, that has 29 million smart meters connected onto their network. So they are using those to do remote meter reading, and there are also plans to integrate the renewables into that same network to give better control.
And of course, the implementation of any new technology, from the resident, the commuter to the consumer, the biggest box that most people have to tick is always, well, what's in it for me? So how does smart city technology benefit those everyday business residents, commuters and consumers that are listening? And how are you seeing these initiatives being supported?
So I think going back to the street lighting again, there's an immediate benefit for the city just in terms of energy saving and in the maintenance cycles from the perception of the city users. Then they have good street lighting, which improves public safety. I mean, certainly, if you look at the City of London, next time people are walking around London, the Millennium Bridge is illuminated using smart technology, as is St. Paul's Cathedral. So you have the aesthetics taken into consideration, the safety aspects, smart signs certainly improve convenience for particularly with parking. So there's a number of benefits from that point of view. There are some interesting initiatives in terms of pollution monitoring and pollution control. So if it's possible to integrate the traffic lights into a controlled sequence and then provide information on the optimum speed to travel, then there's less start-stop in terms of traffic. It moves more freely, you get less pollution. And that's an initiative they're doing in Copenhagen right now.
And of course, also in every big city, there is an increase in cameras and sensors, all gathering data. How do you tackle things? Well, how do you deliver a project like that without it feeling intrusive or infringing on privacy? Because, again, it's a hot topic, isn't it? That everybody's like doing a careful dance and tiptoeing around.
And I think the first step in this has to be appropriate regulation. So that's got to come from the government and the regulators as far as privacy is concerned. I mean, as you mentioned, cameras, there's quite a large number of cameras around. There's this technology that's coming along like facial recognition, which brings problems, and they need to be managed appropriately.
Absolutely. And on a more technical aspect, another question I was going to ask you, for anyone listening that is outside of the tech industry, can I ask you to expand on what exactly interoperability is and why it's so important for IoT and the role that you guys are playing in that as well?
Yeah, certainly. So if we go back a few years to when I first started in this industry, there were very few computer networks around. They were mostly proprietary. So it meant if you wanted to connect your computer onto a particular network, you needed to use the particular network software and hardware that came from a manufacturer. In the early days of cell phones, that was similar as well. And now people expect interoperable solutions probably without even realizing it. So with your mobile phone, you expect to be able to use that wherever you go in the UK, but also to roam abroad with it, and you expect it to just work. The same thing with Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is a particularly good example. Whether it's on your phone or your computer, whatever the product is, you have a Wi-Fi device and you go somewhere and you expect to be able to use it. So we've come to accept that in consumer world. Up until fairly recently, there has not been standardized interoperable technology for these very large-scale networks. There's been a lot of proprietary solutions. And what we're doing in Wi-Sun Alliance is working towards delivering truly interoperable solutions. So you can buy a product from lots of different vendors. You can choose the product for the features it offers, not for the fact that it works on your network, because you know it's going to.
And as I said at the very beginning of the episode, it's such an exciting space to be in at the moment. And you've come from, the last 20, 30 years, you've watched everything evolve and possibly longer. And I'm curious, what is it that excites you about where we're heading now? What makes you jump out of bed in the morning, or what are you focusing on that really excites you about the future?
From my point of view, the way technology continues to evolve and adapt is still very exciting. I think that the Integration of renewable technology, renewable energy is really important. The use of technology to improve the quality of life for people is also extremely beneficial. So another aspect of the technology that really excites me is in the developing world. So certainly things like providing energy into places that haven't previously had it. So there's a initiative in India right now about delivering smart villages. So the typical expression is smart cities, but that excludes large parts of the world, basically. So smart communities and smart villages providing technology that can then provide clean water, that can assist with agriculture. I think those are the exciting areas right now.
Well, I wish you the best of luck for the future. I too am going to be following what you guys are doing very closely and hopefully get you back on later in the year or next year and see how things are progressing. But outside of the tech, it's now time to have a bit of fun with you, because I always like to ask my guests, is there a song that has inspired you in the past, helped you in your career, or just helps you get your head in the zone before going on stage, doing some work, or reminds you of your career in tech? So the biggest question of the entire podcast is, what is your song and why? And we'll add it to our Spotify playlist.
My goodness. I grew up in North London in the 1970s, and there was a group called Pink Floyd that I would go to see fairly regularly. So it would probably be a Pink Floyd song, and I think it's probably Breathe from Dark Side of the Moon album.
Wow, what a great choice. I absolutely love that. And before I let you go, for anyone listening, want to find out more about any information that we've talked about today, or even contact your team, what's the best starting point?
Probably look us up on LinkedIn. So you have my name, Phil Beecher, and the organisation is Y-Sun Alliance. That's WI-SUN.org.
And what about the website? There's so many different domains out there at the moment. Is it just ysun.com or?
Yes. www.y-sun.org.
Excellent. Well, I'll add those links so people can find you nice and easily. I love chatting with you today about how IoT is transforming cities, and also the technology that's making it happen, and how those smart cities benefit businesses and residents, most importantly. And you even managed to leave us with a great song for our Spotify playlist. So thank you for taking the time to share all that and your story with me today.
Thank you.
We covered so much there, didn't we? From about smart cities, what interoperability is, why it's important for IoT, and how Y-Sun Alliance helps. But as always, I think it was Phil's very personal story, starting in 1978 in computer science and physics, and how that progressed and put him on this path to building smart cities all around the world. Incredibly cool. And he also left us with a pretty good song too. But these are the kind of stories that I love sharing on this podcast every day. Yes, how technology is transforming our lives and world and everything in between, but also the human stories behind the people that are building that future tomorrow. So if you've got a question you'd like to ask me or a story you'd like to share, email me now, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, just at Neil C. Hughes. If you'd like to slide into my DMs and not just hit the follow button, send me a message. I'll get straight back to you. But we're now reaching the end of another episode, but I'll be back again tomorrow. We've got another guest lined up. So thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.